Just give me a second while I try to find my video on... okay, got that. Okay, hi. Well, for those of you who are tuning in, my name is Masin. This is the very first time I'm going live on Facebook, and this is an interesting concept that we came up with. It's called #AskMasim. So if you've got any questions at all about relationships or astrology, you can just post it. So I really am quite nervous right now because this is really our first time doing such a video. I have actually no idea how many people would have questions about this, but I thought this would be a great platform if you've never actually had experience with looking at a real astrology chart when it comes to relationships. I was just having a conversation with one of my assistants earlier, and she's telling me that in the past when we are looking at relationships with astrology, the tendency is to just you know, if you have a new boyfriend and if you know his sign, or what you would do is just go online and see if, oh, he's a Libra, let's see what his personality is like. But one of the big difficulties with that kind of approach is that it's not exactly accurate, is it? Because I ask you to consider that there are 7.2 billion people in the world and there are only 12 astrological signs. So, if it was accurate that all Libran men are the same, well, it doesn't really sound very accurate, does it? So if you have any questions about astrology, I'll be happy to sort of answer them and see if I can give you a little bit more insight into how astrology can give you more information about not just your love interest, but also yourself and your own personal needs when it comes to relationships. So if you've got a question, just put it in the chat box. I've got my laptop in front of me, so I'll see the questions that you have and I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah? Hi, and I see I see a lot of my students and some of my clients are here. Thank you very much for supporting our very first Facebook Live. So if you have questions about astrology, do post it on the chat box so that I will answer questions if you've got any. In fact, for those of you who have been looking at this astrology relationships for the very first time, now many people actually do not know that an astrological chart is a lot more than just your sun sign. So if you're interested in generating a free copy of your birth chart, and you're going to need an accurate birth time to do this, you can visit our website. In fact, I think one of my team members is going to be posting a link to go to the free chart generator very shortly. But if you click on that and you go to our website, you will be able to generate your chart. So what you have to do is just key in your email address, and then you go to step 2, and from there you should be able to key in your birth date, your birth time, as well as the birth city, the city that you're born in, and it will generate a free birth chart with some basic descriptions about what your personality is like, what are some of your needs in your expression, for example. Of course, that's going to be quite a basic description, and you can get more information from an actual astrological consultation. Okay, I've got a question here, and okay, so Jet, I see. How can marriage be determined from an astrological chart? So it doesn't say here what your actual question is, but in an astrology chart, the 7th house, number 7, refers to the house of partnerships and marriage. So typically speaking, that's where an astrologer would start. So it really depends on where you begin from. If you're single and your question is how do I know when I'll get married, then what an astrologer would do is look at transits. So transits are basically, I put your chart and I put what's happening in the sky around you so that I can see what's happening in your life. So if you're going to be married, then I should be seeing a lot of activity going to planets that are in your 7th house, or planets that rule your 7th house. Then usually that's when I know if you will marry, and whether is it going to be the kind of marriage that is planned for a long time, or is it something that happens like, out of the blue. Some people just marry really quickly So that's how you can determine marriage. The other thing also is that you want to determine the quality of your marriage and even what kind of partners you might end up marrying. So that sometimes you get people who are very serious and then they end up marrying partners who are like essentially jokesters and pranksters. Or sometimes you have it the other way around too. So that's one of the ways in which we can sort of determine marriage from an astrological chart. Okay, let's have a look at another question. And Jacqueline asks, I'm wondering about love compatibility between a male Scorpio and a female Sagittarius. So as I mentioned, it would be quite basic for us to simply just look at the sun sign, because just because your boyfriend is Scorpio doesn't always mean that the rest of his chart is Scorpio. In fact, most likely he is not. Now, if he was born in the 1980s though, that would essentially make him quite an intense person. Intense doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. In fact, you'll find a lot of these intense personalities are looking for meaning in life. He's not going to want to have anything superficial, and this also applies to his needs in his relationships. So you'll find with Scorpios, honesty is really important, and you find that trust gets built up over time with honesty. So if you happen to be dating a Scorpio male, there are a couple of things. Like one is you want to maintain upright honesty with him all the time, and the second is that you'll find that at times he may want to make very drastic changes to his life simply because he's just not going to accept life on a superficial level. And so you're going to have to be supportive if he is experimenting or trying out things that may scare some people who are a little bit more conservative. But well, I would say life is never going to be more boring if you're married to a very Scorpionic person. But if you see, if the woman is Sagittarius, then typically speaking, honesty is not an issue, because you'll find for Sagittarius, honor and integrity is actually one of the major things. So that's something that they'll have in common. However, you'll see that Sagittarius can be a little bit more of a risk taker, because Sagittarius is a sign of the explorer. So you might actually be very interested in looking at new experiences, but not so concerned about safety sometimes. And this doesn't always mean you go bungee jumping, but a Sagittarius is likely to say visit countries that you've never been to before. And for a Scorpio, they might your Scorpio partner might feel like, okay, how do we know it's safe, or did you take precautions, or that kind of thing. So a Sagittarius woman might find a Scorpio man a little bit too cautious, and the Scorpio man might find a Sagittarius woman a little bit too foolhardy in that sense. Those are the potential downsides, but you'll find that there's a lot for them to learn from each other. And keep in mind that what I've just said is very basic, it's very superficial, it's just based on the sun signs. You want to get a proper romantic compatibility in order to get more information about this. Okay, let's have a look at what other questions are here. And okay, Gordon asks, how can we know if our astrology signs match each other in relationship? Now, for those of you who have been reading online about astrological signs and relationships, you may be familiar with the elements. So the 4 elements that are used in Western astrology, and these are different from Chinese astrology. In Chinese astrology, there are 5 elements. Some of you may be familiar with Jing Mu Sui Huo Tu. But in Western astrology, there are only 4 elements. They're known as fire, earth, air, and water. Typically speaking, if you're going very superficially in online websites, they usually look at compatibility based on the elements. So if you happen to be a fire sign, like say Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, you may find yourself being more like compatible in that sense with other fire signs. And usually fire signs go okay with the air signs as well. So that would be Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And so that's one pair, fire and air. Then the other pair that tend to go well with each other are the earth signs and the water signs, simply because these 2 elements are a lot more security oriented. So you'll find that the earth signs are like Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So these tend to, like on a very broad sense, go well with each other, but there's no need to panic or to freak out if your partner happens to be from like a different pair from yours. Like for example, if you're a fire sign and your partner's a water sign, that doesn't always mean trouble in paradise, yeah? Because your chart is a complicated chart. So there are 10 planets in the chart. The sun sign is just 1 out of 10. So you're going to have a more holistic view of of your chart to be able to see for sure what your real element is. Because just because you are a Libra doesn't mean that you have to be an air element. You could very well be a water element. So you can't be sure, but of course you can always check in with an astrologer, and an astrologer will be able to advise you in that sense. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Oh wow, I see old friends here. Derek, I have not seen you in years. Well, thanks for joining me. Okay, so Joanne asked, so how we can determine if our partner's zodiac sign is compatible to ours, and I think I've explained that earlier. And what's the difference between synastry and composite charts? So this is a question from Clarissa. Now synastry is when I've got person A, so that's like maybe the guy, and then person B, which is the woman, and the synastry is when I put the charts together like this. So it's like I want to see if they can be compatible in terms of the temperaments. Now I get this question extremely often when it comes to astrology and compatibility. How do we know if we are compatible? And the joke that I always tell my students and my clients is that try not to go to the kind of websites where you sort of key in your birth date and you key in the other person's birth date, and then you press calculate, right? And then they tell you that you're 62.8% compatible or something. Now I'll tell you that kind of calculator, quite frankly, it doesn't really work, because the things we also need to determine what compatibility means. Are we talking about financial compatibility, or intellectual compatibility, or even sexual or emotional compatibility? They are actually very different in nature. So what happens in a synastry, when I put two people's charts together, then I will be able to say for sure which sections or which areas of life tend to be compatible and which ones are less compatible. For example, if one person desperately wants children, they want something like 5 children, and the other person is determined not to have children, then you can have compatibility in almost everything else, but you'll find that this is still going to be a deal breaker. So this is the reason why you have sometimes relationships not really working out, despite people really caring for each other because their life goals are different. And this can happen in other things too, like some people are more aggressive when it comes to, say, investments, and the other person says, well, let's keep all our money in the bank and let's not invest anything. So in a chart, I do need to see the life goals of both parties so that we can compare and contrast to see, can these two people build a life together? So that's a synastry. Now a composite is very different. A composite basically says that two people, A and B, when they come together to form a relationship, they form an entirely new entity. So that means, you know how when Brad Pitt was with Angelina Jolie and they call it Brangelina? So it's like, I know it's a kind of a joke and like a tabloid thing, right? But if you think about it, when you put yourself and your partner together, you kind of form like a Brangelina or whatever your names are, So the composite chart is basically the chart of this Brangelina. The composite chart does not tell me whether Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are compatible with each other. To do that, I will do a synastry. But when I put a Brangelina together, so this is one chart that is the chart of their relationship, then it tells me whether society approves of their relationship or not. It tells me that together as a couple, what are some of the tendencies or the behavior that they might have together. Consider, sometimes, have you not seen that one quiet guy and one quiet girl can get together and somehow they are very expressive about their relationship, but individually they are not so expressive. So this is what I mean by, if I look at individual natal charts and a composite chart of a relationship, their behavior can be extremely different. So if you want to get a holistic examination of your relationship, you want to do both the synastry as well as the composite. Okay, let's see what else is there. Okay, so to what extent is it credible to rely on this information, and how different is astrology in relationship different from the usual horoscope sign? Okay, I would say the credibility of astrological information is dependent on how accurate is the birth data that you give me. And this means that you do need to provide an accurate birth time. So for example, if you were born at 3:18 p.m., you have to say 3:18 p.m. You can't say, oh, just about 3 o'clock. Because 3 p.m., 3:00 p.m. is somebody else's birth time. Your birth time is 3:18. So you'll find that it is accurate as far as your birth time is accurate. Now, if you're a Singaporean, the best way to find your birth time is to check out your birth certificate. For most of you, even if you were not born in Singapore, I would say that if you were born after the 1990s, your birth certificate should be quite reliable in terms of the birth time that you see on the certificate. But of course, your question is really about, can I trust or not? You say all these things, and would it be, necessarily the case? And I know a lot of people are very concerned about this idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? A lot of people are very scared to go and see an astrologer about, hey, I got a new boyfriend, do you think you're compatible? Because they're terrified that what if the astrologer says we're not compatible? And what I will say is that I have very seldom told a couple that they are not compatible. And let me explain why, okay? In your life, you may have encountered thousands of people of the opposite sex or whatever gender it is that you normally date. And out of all those thousands of people, you pick this one person to be in a relationship with. That already tells you that the compatibility is there to a large extent. Right? So the attraction is enough for two people to decide to be with each other. So that actually really tells you you are compatible. So what I'm looking for are potential areas where there can be discord or disagreement. So a couple can be wonderful together, but one person just loves to travel all the time and the other one's just too lazy, they just prefer to stay in Singapore. So these are very real issues that we want couples to sort of look at. And so far, for all the couples who have come to see me, I even had one man, after I did the analysis, this couple had been together for something like 20 over years. And I talked about the kind of arguments that they might have had. And the man laughed and he said, oh my god, do you have like a camera installed in our bedroom? How come you know exactly what we argue about? So that's the kind of accuracy that you can get with Western astrology examination. So the purpose of it is not to say whether you are compatible or not. It's not a black and white comparison. You want to see where you are compatible and where you are not. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, Jingwen said, what does it mean by seeing synchronicity every day? And this happened after I started doing meditation, after going through difficult times in relationship. But I would say when it comes to things like this kind of numerical synchronicity, you might want to consult a numerologist about this, because I have to say I really am not an expert in numbers. So my expertise is in Western astrological charts. So you do want to go to a numerologist. And you can easily find some pretty good ones on the internet. It's quite popular in Singapore nowadays. And I would say that, I don't know, I suppose if you are going through difficult times in your relationship, and if you find that meditation works for you, then continue doing that. I would say that from years of doing astrological consultations, I've actually been doing this full time about 6 years, although this is the first time I'm doing Facebook Live. But generally speaking, I think by and large, any kind of relationships difficulties tend to arise from communication breakdowns. And you'll find that if there is something that is out of integrity or it's not okay in the relationship, one of the easiest way to solve it is to have a direct and honest conversation with your partner. Meditation will help to clear your mind, but unfortunately, meditation doesn't solve your problems. So consider having a good heart-to-heart talk with your partner. Because whether you decide to proceed with the relationship or decide that that you can't come to terms and you want to end it, and so make yourselves both available for other relationships, either way it is a way to move on and definitely a lot better than just feeling like things are difficult and you're stuck and resorting to meditation to clear your mind. It's great for clearing your mind, but it doesn't solve your relationship problems. So Joanne asked, may I know if it's zodiac sign of Cancer and Virgo, and if they are compatible generally? I would say if just basing purely on sun signs, Cancers and Virgos can get along very well together. The reason is because both of them are pretty shy characters. Cancer is the sign of the crab, and it's not usually the kind of sign that wants to get a lot of attention for themselves. They just much rather sort of like stay in a corner. Virgo is kind of like that too. So barring other factors in the chart, by and large, Cancer and Virgos they're quite happy with each other, and they're not necessarily difficult to please in that sense. Although I guess I know Virgo has a reputation for being somewhat fussy. However, you see, Cancer is a security-oriented sign, and Virgo can be a bit predictable in that sense. So I would say this is a combination where they would tend to fuss over each other. So in a motherly way, in a very like fast spot kind of way, it's their way of showing concern for each other. So on the whole, just based on sun signs, Cancer and Virgo, Cancer being a water sign and Virgo being an earth sign, are generally compatible with each other. So that's quite a nice thing. And let's see. Hi, I see so many of my friends are logging in, right? So hi there. I'm very excited that so many of my friends are supportive. I see Ivan, I see Trevor, a lot of my students. Thank you so much. Okay, so Jeremy has asked, are Sagittarians and Gemini signs a good fit because they are natural opposites? Or do we have to look at all 10 planets? And this question is actually from Mary, right? Okay, so I would say just because signs are opposite, so it's not just Gemini and Sagittarius, other kinds of opposite signs are like, for example, like Taurus and Scorpio. So the usual assumption is that because they are opposite signs, that they would not be compatible. I found this to be quite inaccurate generally. You'll find that actually Gemini is a very thinking sign. They are very interested in finding connections. They are putting ideas together. They love to talk. And Sagittarius is like that too. Now, their difficulty is that Gemini tends to focus on the small details, while Sagittarius is looking at the big picture. So in that sense, they could have a little bit of a disagreement, but because they both love to talk so much and they love to analyze things till the cows come home, I would usually say that Geminis and Sagittarius will get along quite well together. Right? And they're also very curious people, always on the lookout for more information. Although Gemini is more interested in information and Sagittarius is more interested in knowledge. So some of the areas in which they might have some kind of discord with each other is Gemini might be more interested in like current or trendy information. Like, hey, did you know this happened? Or this is the latest news? Or did you know this new person just did something? While Sagittarius might look at information like that and say, well, that's like it's not very intellectual and it's kind of like robotic in that sense. While Sagittarius is much more interested in topics that are relating to things like philosophy or religion, politics, like basically big picture topics. They are much more interested in like research, more intellectual stuff. While perhaps Gemini might feel that they are not, they're too judgmental and they're not like, there's not much objectivity. So these are the areas in which they might have some kind of discord, but by and large, they're gonna like hang out with each other because then they can argue like until the cows come home. And for the friends around them, you don't have to panic too much. If they look like they're having an argument, it's just their way of communication, right? Okay, and I see. Okay, now is there a reason why some people get into repeated abusive relationships? Okay, so this actually is quite a serious question because in the choice of a relationship, sometimes you'll find, for those of us who are older and we've had multiple relationships, if you examine them, there are some repeated patterns that tend to get shown up in relationships sometimes. So, for example, I've had female clients coming in tell me that their boyfriends have not been very nice to them in terms of, say, making them feel fat, making them feel unattractive or unintelligent. So these things have happened. And in fact, it's not that there aren't nice guys going after them, but strangely enough, they tend to pick these men who are not very nice to them. And with this kind of pattern, I would say this brings me to my favorite topic in Western astrology, which is psychological astrology. Because it's not so useful just to tell people, oh, you're fun, or that you pick this type of partner. It's interesting, but it doesn't quite help people to solve problems. And in fact, with this question, we are going into like deeper astrology here to actually solve the core issue of why this girl is picking abusive boyfriends. You see, in most times, this kind of situation, it's easy for us to point at the boyfriend and say, oh, he's like, this is not a nice guy, he's a jerk, or whatever. But if you think about it, she always has a choice to leave this relationship, but she's still sticking with it. And even if she leaves this boyfriend, you'll find that the next one's like that too. So the issue, I'm not saying that he's absolved of blame, but I would also like to say that she could be at least partially responsible for why these guys get picked all the time. And so psychological astrology can give us some clues as to why she's doing something like that. Most of the time they actually do know that the boyfriend is abusive, but they're still picking them. I would say very often the chart can give clues as to the background. Sometimes experiences with their father as a male figure, or in fact with their mother as well as a female figure, may have some bearings on how you choose to conduct your relationships. You'll find that from a very young age, based on your experiences, you may make a decision that you want your relationship as an adult to be exactly the same as that of your parents, or there are people who experience their parents' relationship as not being ideal, and so what they end up doing is saying, I don't want my relationship to be like my parents. So either way, whatever you have decided, psychological astrology gives me a clue as to what are some of the characteristics of relationships that you might be seeking. So in this case, of course, if a girl is having multiple abusive relationships, then do have a chat with her and see if she would be interested in looking at psychological astrology to ascertain the original reason why she's picking these relationships. And you'll find that it's very rewarding to look at that, simply because once it is settled, she can now move on into newer chapters of her life where she can pick relationships that are more empowering for herself and for herself value. Right, so with that, yeah. And in fact, this brings me to another thing. I actually have, I'll probably repeat this again at the end of our broadcast, but on the 8th of November, that would be just next week, I think. On the 8th of November, I'm having a free event, so this is free of charge, and my event is the astrology of fulfilling relationships. So if you'd like to RSVP to our event, so you will have to come down to Selfstrology Academy to attend this, but if you have questions about relationships or psychology of relationships, you're very welcome to bring your questions to us. And all we ask is that you RSVP to us, and you just have to send us an email at hello@selfstrology.com with your name and your mobile phone number so that we can reserve a seat for you. Right? So I'll just take the next question. Okay, so Hila says, if you're single, is it wise to seek someone that matches the characteristic of the sun sign or the moon sign? Okay, this question is actually from my student, right? So in my astrology class, I actually educate my students about what are the indicators that show what I call the girlfriend planet and the wife planet, and there is such a thing as a boyfriend planet and the husband planet. So right now, my student wants to know, if you're single and you're young, does it make sense for you to go look for someone who fits the description of a long-term partner? And by that, she means a marriage partner. Then my answer to that is, it depends on at what stage of life are you actually ready to be married. And I know for lots of people, the default answer seems to be, oh yeah, I'm ready to be married. But you know how so many people walk away from relationships just as it gets serious. So before I answer that question, I'm going to need you to be honest with yourself. Are you ready to be married? That means if you actually meet that person, would you be ready to say yes immediately? Now, if your answer is a yes, a clear resounding yes, I'm ready to marry, I want to settle down, I want to buy a house, then yes, for sure. Look at your chart for all the indicators of a long-term partner, and you want to be very clear about the partner that you're looking for, and then you should be able to find that person. But let's just say you're not. And if you're in your late teens, if you're in your early 20s, and marriage is something that, it's like someday, one day, and you're like, oh, it sounds like a great idea to get married, but I'm not sure if I'll say yes tomorrow, then in that case, there are times when it would actually make more sense for you to be looking for people who fit the description of a boyfriend or a girlfriend, because there is nothing wrong with looking at relationships that are, it's fun, and maybe there are learning opportunities, but not necessarily for settling down. I know what I'm saying is a little bit contrary to public opinion, but I will say, if you're not ready to be married, there's nothing wrong in looking for a partner who may not fit the characteristics of your marriage partner, right? So this is what I mean by, that there's a necessity to be really honest with yourself before you start looking for a partner. Okay, and of course, there is nothing stopping you from finding somebody who fits both descriptions. I will say that that's actually the most rewarding relationship of all. And that's how you see loving couples who are together for many, many years. They can still go on dates and all. There are people who say like, oh, my husband is like my boyfriend. And those are the happy couples who have been able to link both the descriptions of the boyfriend as well as the husband together, so that they never stop dating even when they get married. And that would be the best kind of relationship. Okay, I'm looking at my clock now, and it's 7:29. So I probably don't have time to take another question right now. But just in case you have any more questions, as I mentioned, there is a free event on the 8th of November. I believe my team will send out the poster for this on my Facebook page very shortly, so you have more details there. Now, if you'd like to attend the event, feel free to bring your questions. I will be here live, and I will take questions from the audience about relationships. So feel free to bring your questions and also to attend our free event. So all you have to do is email hello@selfstrology.com with your name and your email address. And and we will reserve a seat for you. So my team will send you a reply, your email, to confirm that your seat has been reserved. So it seems that I've come to the end of my first Facebook Live, and considering I was very nervous when I first started, it seems that I have managed to answer quite a number of questions. So I hope you've all gotten the answers that you were looking for, and and feel free to just follow our channel so that you'll be informed of any more Facebook Lives. I look forward to more of such videos on a monthly basis, and we will change the topic every month. So so if you have questions about other things like money or career or family, stay tuned, and eventually we'll come right down to your topic, and feel free to send your questions, right? Okay, so thank you very much, and so feel free to come follow our page. See you, bye bye.